Revelation 21, verse 7 is the last verse of our epistle text this morning. And next week we get one more reading from the book of Revelation. I mean, we've jumped way ahead in this thing. We're way at the end now. And next week's reading is going to pick up Revelation 21, verse 9. I'm going to say it again. We stop 21, verse 7. We start 21, verse 9. Let me read to you verse 8. But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, as for murderers, the sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. I get why we skip it, but I also don't get why we skip it. Because if we're going to be believers in salvation, then salvation must be from something. Salvation is not just a cheery, happy, optimistic getting better. Salvation is that there is a threat. So like the common image, right? What do you have a lifeguard for? And their life saver that they throw, right? To save you from drowning. Well, the threat that we are under temporally right now is not suffering. And it's not even really death, although it was. Okay? So the threat was death, but now isn't really death either. That has been taken care of by Jesus. The threat is falling away. Choosing to go back underneath God's wrath. So that the one you need to be saved from isn't the devil, but God. Now, you don't need that now, but the rest of the world still does. It is not the devil that is their real danger. It is our Lord Jesus Christ and the sword of his mouth and that fire in his eyes from a couple of weeks ago. And this lake of fire, which we're told elsewhere in Revelation has a very singular purpose, this lake of fire. This is hell, by the way, with all of what we mean with that word. We've talked about how that word kind of has two meanings. One before Jesus returns and we raise from the dead, and one after. This is the after, the lake of fire. And its particular job is not for unbelievers to be thrown into. It is for the devil and all his angels to be thrown into. It is prepared as a punishment for the demons by God forever. Humans aren't supposed to go there. Humans are supposed to rise from the dead in the resurrection of Jesus Christ unto an eternal paradise. The problem is, there are some humans who don't want to go to paradise. Now, they might say they do. They talk about how we're all trying to get to the same place, and they really hope it's better in the next life. And then you tell them about the death and resurrection of Jesus, and they go, pfft. You tell them about Jesus' words, about himself, about who God is, that his sheep hear his voice, and they go, I'm not one of those sheep. Well, then, you don't want paradise. And this will be demonstrated on Judgment Day when... Now, I'm stepping halfway, so I'm going to let you know this. I'm halfway into speculation, just half a toe. They're going to cast themselves into the fire. God will say, depart from me, and they're going to be like, yep, sure, here we go. It'll be better there. You've heard it said, better to burn in hell than to serve in heaven, right? That's what they're going to do. Verse 8 here is the warning about that. That this is the meet, right, and just results of a life given to lies, mystical magic, preferring things that are not God to God, using sex as a license for passion, murder, which is all forms of hate. He even throws the cowardly in there, but really he's not talking about if you're afraid of going to war. He's talking about if you're afraid to stand on the word of God when someone says, did God really say? That terrible second death lake of fire has to be held as the counterpoint to all the good that we heard read right before it, and also the good that will come after it next week. Next week, I forget now if it's an angel or it's one of the 7 angels that has these bowls of wrath, which you've not seen, but we've talked about. is going to come to John and say, let's go look at Zion. Let's go look at the city of God coming down out of heaven. And we'll get there. It's about where we're going to live and the beauty of paradise restored. The rest of our text from this morning is the front end of that. The new heavens and the new earth. And this idea we definitely need to spend a little time on. But part of me wants to zoom back. We're skipping so much. So at least let me give you two other things that have happened. We have seen Jesus establish a millennium, a 1,000-year reign over everything. This is in chapter 18. This millennium, we talked about numbers last week, is the number 10 cubed, right? 10 is a complete number, like the 10 Commandments are the complete law, and 3, the number of the Trinity. So 10 to the third power is the Trinity's completion, 1,000. Jesus establishes a 1,000-year reign. This is not a reign that'll be over in 1,000 years. This is a never-ending reign. It began the moment he was crucified, and it hasn't stopped. The crown was put on his head, and Pilate, as an authority of this world, said, "The king, look at him." And he hasn't stopped. His resurrection continues, and it will go into all eternity. He has established that. But in that, with that being established, the devil is not content. And so he tries to break free from the chains which bind him, and he mounts a war against Jesus. I'm going to read you some of this. I love this language. He will come out to deceive the nations, Gog and Magog, to gather for battle, their number like the sand of the sea. They march over the broad plain of the earth and surround the camp of the saints, that beloved city. But fire comes down from heaven and consumes them. And the devil who had deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet were, that they might be tormented day and night forever. Now, we're not going to go into all that imagery. Gog and Magog, this is Old Testament language out of the book of Ezekiel. It has to do with the pictures of a marauding, terrifying, warring peoples, like barbarians, the most you can think of, a horde coming down and trying to destroy a civilization. And that picture is supposed to be you, the civilization, you church, you baptism supper preaching from the Bible, and that horde surrounding you to destroy you is the devil and all of his angels, right? The demonic hordes that want to deceive us with lying words. And so the picture of the church, get this, the picture of the church in time and space right now is not one of triumph and success, but of a meager little band of fighters scrapping their way through while assaulted by a horde. That's what we've seen so far. But then there's this fire that comes out of heaven. Think Sodom and Gomorrah. Think God's wrath. Think God's not being willing to allow his people to perish. This fire comes down out of heaven and defeats the devil. And we know that this has happened at the cross, but that even now as we sojourn, though his time is short, he cannot undo Christ's church. That's the point. Then we see this great white throne judgment, where there's this huge marble white, I don't know, what do you make a throne out of to make it white? Huge throne. And Jesus sits down on the throne. And it says, I just got to read it to you again, it's so beautiful. Earth and sky fled away from him. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne. Books were opened. Then another book was opened, that is the book of life. The dead were judged by what was written in the books, according to what they had done. And the sea gave up the dead who were in it, death and Hades, and they were judged according to what they had done. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And, verse 15, if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. Now this is huge. Get this. So, giant white throne, Jesus on it, lots of books, right? Like, how many books would it take to write down everything you individually thought, said, or did a whole life long? I don't even know. I'm thinking, this library, right? Just for me. How this is going to happen, I don't know. It's a picture to show us something, but we should believe the substance is real. Imagine the books are piled to the sky, right? And we're all being brought in front of these books as they're being opened. And the world is being judged by what's written in these books, every thought, every word, every deed. But these aren't the only books. Don't miss this. There's this other book sitting up there by Jesus at his hand. It's the book of life. So the whole world is judged by what they have done, and then by what they have done, they're sent into hell. But nobody goes to paradise because of what they've done. But there's this other book. So that after you've been judged for what you've done, and the judgment is you're going to go to hell, Jesus says, wait. Got to look for Fisk. And he's got a million names, right, all the way through, well, maybe not a million Fisks, but all the way down Jonathan. That one's baptized. He doesn't go. Go that way. Sheep and goats, boom. Yeah? That's the judgment that is taking place right before our text. Now, what do you take from this? The church in earth is a struggle surrounded by hordes, but we're going to get to a judgment in which your works cannot save you, but Jesus already has. Is this different than what we already know? Not a bit. Just really cool pictures. Really cool pictures. And then, following this opening of the book of life and the saved being pulled out from amidst the unsaved before the unsaved are cast into that fire or cast themselves into that fire, John says, verse 21, "Then I saw a new heavens and a new earth." I'm going to say the rest. "For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away." So, can you follow this? As we talk about how the word heaven right now, for us, means I die and I go there, right? Usually that's what we mean. And yet, we talk about heaven also as where we will be forever. And the problem is there's two heavens in the Bible, right? And the one that we die and we go to with Christ right now, it will pass away. It's going to die. Because it's part of this fallen creation. And all this fallen creation must be done away with. The resurrection is the moment where you're being pulled out of this fallen creation. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying heaven is sinful or anything like that, nor that the angels are sinful. But that in order for the new heavens to come, the old must pass away. Huh? And so all those who are dead are raised at that point. And everything that we know, from the ground all the way up to whatever spiritual realm we can imagine, all of it ends. Now, it might be a little helpful here to remember that the word heaven for the Hebrew has even more of a complex meaning. Because when they go outside and they watch the birds are in the heavens. And then they look at the stars, and the stars are in the heavens. And then there is God who is in the heavens. Now, they don't mean that God is out there in outer space. But they do have no way of distinguishing between the upward away from us motion. Yeah? So for the heavens to pass away does mean ground, sea, it says as well, sky, stars, and then whatever realm the angels inhabit, gone, because a new one is coming. A better one is coming. And here's the big difference. The old one, even what is good of it, is bent under Adam's thumb, which has been put underneath the devil's thumb. It's all made from the dirt. Yeah? The dirt was the head of it. And as long as Adam remains sinful, it cannot be good. So, Jesus, the second Adam, taking that dirt, amazingly, his body, dirt, putting it in the ground, coming out again, he declares, "I go to prepare a place for you." Remember that kind of talk? Yeah? "I go to prepare a place for you." This new heavens and new earth is not going to be built from Adam's body, but from Jesus' body. So that whatever comes, for everyone who's good and lives forever, including angels, animals, stars, plants, all this stuff, it's all a new world built out of Jesus. And that's the primary point to take from this. The holy city, New Jerusalem, verse 2, we're going to get a lot more of that next week, But he sees that in this new heavens and new earth, new creation for mankind to live in, there's a city. And he calls it Jerusalem because Jerusalem is the primary city of God in the Old Testament. This does not mean it will actually be on a rock over in Palestine. What it does mean is that it will be a glorious, beautiful, unassailable city. One of my favorite Psalms it tells you. It says, "Are you worried? Are you afraid? Go look at Zion. Walk around her walls and see how no army could defeat them. Look at her citadels and how strong they are." The idea here is to understand that the city is one that the enemy can never reach. Let's just leave it with that this morning. New Jerusalem, the unreachable city by the enemy, comes down out of heaven from God, prepared like a bride, adorned for her husband. Do you know the white dress for the bride comes out of the book of Revelation? Did you know that? It's pretty cool. The idea is having been made pure. These white robes that all believers have, but now he's saying that all of us Christians are the bride of Jesus, the bride of Christ. Now, you've probably heard this talk before. The church is the bride of Christ. What's that mean? Does that mean we're actually all each individually getting married to Jesus? And then how's that work for the guys, right? But that's the wrong idea. It isn't about a sexual union with Jesus. It is about the commitment that a husband makes to his wife as built into creation is what Jesus is making to us, which is to never leave nor forsake till death do you part. And actually, I'm dragging you out of death, so there's no death. For better or for worse, I'm taking all the worse away, right? And my fidelity, my faithfulness will be outlasting, everlasting. That's the idea. So that we are coming as the one who receives, as opposed to as the one who is the head. He hears language about this bride, about us being part of this city. Verse 3, "And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Behold,'" let's check it out. Look here, pay attention right now. "The dwelling place of God is with man." Remember back in Advent, last Sunday of Advent, we sang it, O come, Emmanuel." Emmanuel means God with us. We love it at Christmas time because there he is, little baby in the manger. It's going to be even better on the last day when our King on his throne leads us into that glorious city, and he never leaves us again. No arguments about politics the rest of eternity, because the King will always be good. God will be with us. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. You've heard this last week, he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. So we move into this idea that for better or for worse, but there's no more worse, because all the suffering's being taken away. And the image of your tears being dried is such a potent one, because who has not ever known tears? I don't cry often, but when I do, I try to stop it. Every time, because I don't want to. And I don't want to because it hurts. Even the joyful tears hurt a little bit. And that's just it. That is being taken away. What a thing. A whole world like that. Death shall be no more. Excuse me. We can't even imagine a world without death. Death is so natural and normal to us that we actually think it's how God made man out of monkeys, was by killing them a lot until the strong ones got smarter. That's Darwinism. Okay? They worship death. Death is going to be taken away. It's the enemy. It's thrown into the fire. Death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, right? Like weeping, sadness, discontent. Never a moment of discontent, nor crying, nor pain, for the former things that sin have passed away. And then you hear these beautiful lines from the throne. Jesus himself says, "Behold, I am making all things new." I've only seen the movie The Passion of the Christ once, and that was kind of enough for me. I have a friend who watches it every year on Good Friday. I can get that too. It's not a perfect movie. It's actually got some really bad Roman Catholic Council of Trent false teaching in it about the sacrifice of the Mass at a number of points. But Mel Gibson got it right when Jesus is walking the Via Dolorosa, right, the road to the cross. And he's already been scourged more than really probably happened. But the gore is part of the show. And he can barely move, and he's carrying the cross, and he stumbles. And all the while, Mary, his mother, has been following him, and she's having these flashbacks of him as a child, where he's off running, and he stumbles and falls, and then she has to kind of run after him as a child. So as he stumbles and falls with the beam of the cross on his back and his blood everywhere, she runs out to him and grabs him, and he looks up, and there's blood and sweat falling off his face, and he says, "Look, Mother, I'm making all things new." I'm going to tear up now. Jeez. Mel Gibson got it with that moment. Whether he believes it now, you can ask him. But he got it with that moment. I am making all things new. The heavens and the earth which are coming are no different from his death and resurrection. They are one. Yes? And we are one with it in our baptisms. None of that should be lost to us. That we are waiting for something substantial and real and already achieved on the cross. Thus, he says, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true, right? John, go write the scriptures. I actually believe, you can debate this, I believe this is the first thing that John wrote. There's 5 things we have from him, his gospel, 3 letters, and Revelation. And twice in Revelation, he's told, write it down. He's the last living apostle. Everybody else is dead. He's going to be dead soon. God says, write it down. He writes it down. Either way, even if he wrote the Gospel of John first, what you should take from this writing it down here again is look to the Holy Scriptures. Look to what is clearly written. See that because it is trustworthy and it is true. And then Jesus kind of starts to yell. You know, I've been watching NBA basketball. I'm a stupid fan of the Portland Trailblazers. I've been since a kid. I grew up a little bit in Portland. And for the first time in like 20 years, they're in the Western Conference Finals, getting it just handed to them by the Golden State Warriors. But I love basketball. And when you're playing basketball and someone goes down the lane in the center and they have the ball and they can dunk it and they can really dunk it and they wind up and they jam and they hang on that thing, they never go, shh. When they do it, they yell. They scream a warrior's cry, ah, and they throw it down. You got to hear, now Jesus isn't going, ah, but when he says this is a booming, masculine, triumphant warrior's victorious statement. It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. Oh, so good. It is finished. You heard it at the cross. Same words. It is done. Alpha and Omega, that's Alpha, first letter in Greek. Omega, last letter in Greek. We would have a Z there. They have the O there. Their Z is way at the front. Doesn't matter. Point being, first and last. Nothing before him, nothing after him. So when he says it's done, it's done. And what is done? To the thirsty, I will give from the spring of the water of life without payment. We talked last week a little bit about living water. And what you drink now, just next time you go drink a glass of water, just think, this is dead water. This is dead water. This is dead water. And then think about how you're going to get living water. Because the dead water is pretty good, right? It ain't bad if it's clean. So what must living water be like? And now he adds to this, the spring of the water of life without payment. Remember, we were doing it with the books a moment ago. What you do cannot earn it. It's all being given. And then don't miss the tie of the spring of water here in baptism that binds you to that giving as well. I'm not saying baptism is exactly the water you'll drink, but there definitely is an overlap in these ideas. I will give the spring of water of life without payment. The one who conquers will have this heritage. That is a throwback to the end of every single one of the 7 letters written to the 7 churches that aren't all the churches in Asia Minor at the start of the letter. In every single one of them, he gives them a name that he is. He talks about what's really going on with them. He tells them that they need to do this one thing, and then he gives them a promise attached to their conquering. To the one who conquers, I will. To the one who conquers, I will. Number of different things. The right to the tree of life. One of my favorites is, one of them is told, a white stone with a name on it that no one knows but himself. It's kind of weird, kind of cool, I don't know. But now, the same idea, 7 times in the past, now being brought to fulfillment. An 8th time. We've talked about 8 before, the number of salvation, right? Here it is, the 8th time. If you conquer, I will be his God, and he will be my son. Not just servant, not just friend, not just people, son. And don't think, ladies, this means you're going to be a boy, right? It means, like unto the husband to wife is fidelity, so here also father to son is inheritance. All that I have is yours. That is what Jesus will be bestowing upon everyone who's about to enter into the city of the New Jerusalem. And it's the city that will show us that picture. It's what Jesus has purchased on the cross. It's what you believe already. This is nothing new, right? It's just different images. We'll get to the Zion picture next week, but it's right after that word son that we have this warning. To the world and its unbelief, there will be the lake of fire and the second death. Now, I'm not one who likes to leave you with warnings. I don't. I prefer to leave you with, go in peace, you are free. Because I think that's what actually inspires faith in people. But at the same time, as I started, if you don't know what you're being saved from, then there is no real salvation, right? So what are you being saved from? Your murderous heart, your adulterous mind, your lying tongue, the death and the hell that you deserve because of those things. And you, Christian, are saved from it. The vast majority of the rest of this world is saved from it, but doesn't believe it. And I think you ought to tell them. In the name of Jesus, amen.